Okay, yeah. Let's start with today's lecture. The last point that I wanted to mention from last time that we didn't went through was notebooks. I wanted to briefly mention what are those notebook things that we are actually using, because like knowing the basics of how they work and what they are, it can actually be useful to troubleshoot things that can happen with them. So we saw last time how to run simple scripts from your computer. So like those scripts are the basic way of running Python code. So you put it in a TXT file, or like in a Py file that is just a text file. You throw it like give it to an interpreter, and the interpreter will go line by line and execute that script. This is like a good way of putting together code. It can be annoying for troubleshoot, because like you have to run the whole script beginning to end. If you generate figures, you have to open them in another place. I mean, they can be open in the system, but it is less interactive. In general, there are better ways of dealing with code. Or like with developing Python code. One way is an interface that is called Spider, that is probably similar to the environments that people are used to in MATLAB and R. I personally never use Spider, and I really like, maybe some of you who tried Python tried it out, but I think that notebooks have some very powerful tools in them, and like they are a very nice interface to be aware of. So I will leave it to you guys. If you want to explore something like Spider, feel free. But here I wanted to, maybe the functioning of that is more transparent to you if you are used to like R or MATLAB, while notebooks are something quite different. So I wanted to explain them a bit. So you have been seeing, like when we run those notebooks, we basically, even when we run them locally, if we call notebooks, this will run like open a browser and open a page in a browser. You experience that if you try the installation instructions that I was mentioning. And this is because the whole infrastructure of Jupyter Notebooks is basically powered by the same ways of coding that powered like websites. So what you see in a notebook, you see it because like there is basically some HTML code, there is some JavaScript code, there is some like all those tools together create and render the nice page that you see with the cells, and take care of visualizing it in a web page. So, yeah, sorry. Sure.
But isn't it a bit hard with Jupyter Lab or Jupyter Notebook to debug a code? For example, if you want to go line by line through a code and find how a variable change step by step, it's not easy. I think I've never used PyCharm or Spider or other tools, but isn't it a bit difficult with Jupyter Notebook or Jupyter Lab?
Yeah, so definitely it is. The way I personally do it is usually I work with notebooks when I have to when I'm starting an analysis, where I have to play very interactively with some data. I have to open some data, make some plots in a way that is very like I constantly need to like print stuff, read stuff. Like I don't know exactly what I'm loading. I don't know how data look like. I have to make many plots. The deeper that I go in an analysis, the more I kind of consolidate the code that I have, the more I tend to move that code from notebooks to modules. And today we'll see a step of how to put code in a way that is accessible from multiple notebooks. And from there, I actually, usually when I develop a project that starts becoming something like the data analysis for a paper that I'm doing, I start to work on a full kind of package that run that analysis. And at that point, I would normally use PyCharm to work on big scripts and bigger chunks of code, because yes, it is a more powerful IDE under many aspects. So it is good when you start working with a lot of scripts. So for very large pieces of code, notebooks are not the ideal solution. For, I would say, everything of the size that we are seeing in this course, I feel that they are a very convenient tool. Yeah, and basically Jupyter Notebooks have two parts, and we will now briefly look at those two parts. So we have the interface that we actually look at in the browser, so this page, and they have a kernel that is actually a session of the Python interpreter that is open and that is running the instructions that we are giving to it. And this is what gets stuck basically on the terminal that you open. Like you notice that when you run it from the terminal, you cannot do anything else on the terminal. Is because from that terminal there is this it's called kernel running. So yeah, the user interface is the page that we see. Sorry, probably a bit small. But like you see in the page we find some markdown text, which is like what you see displayed as like titles and plain text is actually stuff that is written in markdown. And this is actually also very, very nice because, for example, like in markdown we can write, like we can format text, we can also put formulas. So if we want to make like Jupyter Notebooks are a great tool to write tutorials or to read tutorials or to write an explanation about like your data. They can be a very, very nice way, and I would encourage, like if you have to to give someone a piece of code that is doing some analysis and you want to explain what you're doing, you can use those markdown cells to put some code, to put formulas, to insert images that you can load, and having them displayed together with the code sometimes can be very readable and very, very useful. And then you have some cells where you actually write Python code, and then below the cells, when you run them, you get the reply, like you get whatever the interpreter is replying to you. And the kernel is, yes, as we mentioned, is basically just an open session of the Python interpreter to which we dispatch instructions every time we run the cell. So every time we run the cell, the notebook is basically sending those lines of code to the server, to the kernel. The kernel is running them, is sending them to the processor. We get all the replies, and then the kernel dispatches back the replies from from whatever code we executed. Like if we were just, I don't know, defining a function, we would not see printed anything. If we were to make a print statement or display an image or do whatever, we will get that whatever reply below the cell of code. Yeah, making sure like you have to understand the fact that like even if those pages are open on a browser, when you're running locally your Python session, this is not going through some internet connection. Like if you run Jupyter Notebook from your local terminal and you don't have any internet, you will see a web page opening and you will see your notebook just displayed normally, because this is not going through the internet. It's your terminal that is directly communicating with your web page. Okay. And the key intuition behind this, like the people who thought about developing those notebooks thought, okay, let's rely on a technology that, which technology in the sense of software, to develop this interface that is very common and that can be run independently of the platform and potentially through many different in many different rendering ways. And we don't have, the cool thing is that we can take the same code, which is the code that structures our page, and we can run it from our local terminal, we can run it from Google Colab, we can run it using on our local terminal remote, like a kernel session that is open on a remote computing facility machine. And in all those cases, we always get the same interface, basically. We always have the same notebook. But the Python code that you're running can very easily be dispatched to different kernels that are like either a local kernel, a remote kernel that Google gives us, a kernel that you install on a computer that is much more powerful than your laptop and that you connect to. And so one of the very cool thing about those notebooks is that if, for example, you have a heavy, an analysis where you're using very heavy data that you cannot run on your laptop, you can set up a kernel on, for example, if you have a cluster that is that you're using for computing stuff, or a workstation at your office that is much more powerful than your computer. You can set up a kernel there, and you can open in your own browser the Jupyter, the Jupyter Notebook page, and work on it exactly in the same way as if you were running a local kernel, and you would get exactly the same kind of interface. So you do not have to, I don't know, connect remotely through any desk or TeamViewer or whatever thing to work with a remote connection to the machine. You can just put a page and change the kernel behind this. This is obviously not trivial, but like this is something that you can set up and makes it very convenient to work with remotely with data. And yeah, another thing that is important to understand is that every time you open, you run Jupyter Notebook, you get that kind of home page from which you can open multiple notebooks. Each one of those notebooks has a different kernel. So each one of those notebooks is a different kind of interpreter session. So if you define code in one notebook, for example, if you define a function in one notebook, you cannot use that function in the other notebook. Okay, to actually share code across notebooks, you have to we will see how to do it, but you cannot assume that the variables that you have in a notebook and the functions that you have in a notebook will work and will be accessible in another notebook. Okay. So yeah, the first practical for today is to actually opening, as you did for the installation, opening a Jupyter Notebook, and then create a new notebook, making sure that you select the course environment, and you define a very stupid little function in that notebook in the first cell, and then you try to open another notebook, and you try to use that function to make sure that this point comes through. You can create the notebook wherever you want. Just decide on a folder in your system where you want to create the notebook. Actually, this wasn't specified. But then when you create the notebook, you will see that you get to select the environment that the kernel is from. And there you have to specify the environment. But the actual file you can create anywhere you like. Ma dopo a quel punto dopo che l'avevi fatto c'erano quelle sezioni di roba da installarci dentro.
Yeah, so typically you build the server on your computer, and this one serves your browser, and whenever you write in your browser, the autosave function is saving the file that you created.
Ok.
And, yeah.
Adesso also if I'm not connected to internet, I
Yeah,
just
it's
turn
always
auto
on.
save.
Yeah.
Deattiva l'environment, exit, no, di conto deattivi con deactivate, così senza le comando di terminale, e ora prova a riaprire il notebook. Da qui? No, questa cosa, allora, noi abbiamo fatto un nuovo environment, sì, ci abbiamo installato delle librerie, tra cui una libreria che permette a quell'environment di interagire con... È che evidente per qualche motivo, forse la prima riga ti era andata, ma per qualche motivo non ti era andata la seconda riga, e con quell'istruzione lì, quando scriviamo hyperkernel, quell'istruzione lì sta dicendo, cioè sta usando questa funzione terminale di hyperkernel per aggiungere questo environment alle opzioni di Jupyter come kernel che può usare nei payload. Ok, grazie.
Avevo dato questo messaggio su desktop come posizione della locale. Questo è installato con un file tipo...
Yes, un file che aveva un'estensione che si chiama IMB. Come dire... E se ci guardi dentro è un file HTML.
Però non si apre facendo doppio clic, cioè devo sempre aprirlo.
Sì.
Ok. Cioè se faccio doppio clic mi dice scegli un'app e non c'è
Non so se non mi sono mai informato, non ho mai pensato. Magari esiste un modo di renderlo doppio cliccabile, non lo so. Milano? In uno lo definisci e nell'altro proprio parla. Cioè prova a definirle in un notebook e poi crei un nuovo notebook e la provi a usare nell'altro notebook. È previsto che non funziona. Ora facciamo un po'. Yeah, so let's actually have a look at it together. So first of all, you had to open Jupyter Notebook. I already have my Jupyter session open here. And then the point was to add a new notebook specifying this environment. And in this new empty notebook, note probably you have noticed like all those notebooks, anytime you open a new notebook, this creates a file with extension IPyNB. This is just the way those notebooks are saved. You can open them those are HTML files. You can open them as TXT files, and you will see a bunch of weird looking code, like not only your code, but also some additional stuff that is what renders the thing. It's actually not HTML, but it's like, I don't know the extension, but it's something that can be rendered in an HTML thing when you actually displayed it. So we have a new notebook. We can name it notebook 2. And I will actually, like, we are not doing it as an exercise, but my suggestion is to also try, we were not doing it until now, but the moment you start doing notebooks on your own, I always recommend to put, like, you can press M and Y to change between markdown, like to make a cell either a code cell or a markdown cell. And if you make something markdown, you can start editing it. You can put the notebook title, and then usually what I do when I code an analysis, I usually, like at the beginning, I'm like, each notebook is taking care of some small portion of an analysis. And so my recommendation to kind of keep this scope, like you will notice that the moment you start playing with a notebook with actual data, you create the notebook, you start putting code there where you load stuff, you start plotting stuff, and there is this it's very easy to get the range from the original purpose of that notebook and to grow it in a gigantic multi-purpose thing that takes care of pre-processing and plotting and finalizing a bunch of stuff. So usually to keep the scope of the notebook contained, I start with a list of what we will be doing in this notebook, and we say we define a dummy function. And you can put here what will happen in this notebook. Like we load this data, we check what the resolution of the stack is, we correct this artifact, we do whatever. Okay, and this this renders as a bullet point that you can check out. So we are just defining test function, print hello, and then we are creating, this is just notebook one, and then we are creating a new notebook 2, and again we say notebook 2, here we use dummy function. And yeah, markdown is it is basically, most of the time you're just writing normally. You can put you can just check out online, you can find how to write markdown code, but it's basically to put titles, you have asterisk in front, to make bullet point, you have kind of hyphen, you can make things bold with double asterisk, like WhatsApp, when you make italics or bold in WhatsApp, it's taken from markdown syntax. And yeah, you can edit it in this way, and here we try to use test function, and this obviously will not work because this is not defined in this notebook. And this, I mean, as you can imagine, this is obviously a problem because many times you define somewhere in a notebook a function that you use to, I don't know, load your data, the noise, put your data in a nice pandas data frame, do whatever. So it's very convenient to be able to import the same functions from multiple notebooks. So let's now see how to do it. So there is actually more than one way of doing it. We will check out the simplest. So the cleanest thing that you can do is to organize your code in a pip installable package of utility functions that you then pip install, and you can import from that package. Doing it is not trivial, and I fear a bit beyond the scope of this first part. I wanted to have one of the optional lectures at the end to have something like organize your code for keeping it clean, sharing it, and publish it eventually. So maybe in that lecture we can have a look at something like that. For now, let's keep it simple and let's just look at the most basic way. And the most basic way is to just define our functions in a .py file that we keep in the same folder as the notebooks that we're using it from. And we can just import then the functions that we're using from there. Okay. So you can just check it out on your own. So create a new file, and you can edit txt files directly from Jupyter. You can do this with your normal notepad or whatever, but you can also just do it from Jupyter. So you can create, instead of a new notebook, you can create a txt file, which then you rename as a .py file. In this case, this is important to import stuff from the file. You define, like you move your function and you put it there, and then you try to, like you will have to restart the notebook kernel to make sure that it sees things that have happened outside. And then you will be able to import this test function from the .py file. Check it out. So make sure that you create this utility, like utils.py file in the same folder where you have the notebooks. Yep.
Restart the notebook kernel as in the terminal.
No, sorry. To restart the notebook kernel, in the notebook you see on top you have a bunch of options. There is a drop-down menu kernel, and there you can just restart the kernel.
Okay.
No, from the notebook.
Yes, restart.
From a notebook.
Okay.
vedi effettivamente per quanto semplice fare qualcosa. No, però.
Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, so this was not super clear from here, and probably I might have created some confusion earlier. So the idea is you have a Jupyter session, Jupyter notebook session, but then every single notebook has a new kernel. So anything that is related to the kernel, you will find it in the notebook page that you have. While every new file that we want to create in Jupyter, this we want to create from the main page. So to create a new file, we go to the main page, we say new text file, we call this utils.py, and you have noticed that at least this is not a great text editor. I would not recommend it. I usually just keep it open to copy paste stuff that I define in notebooks. But then there are better interfaces, and I will mention them when I show you how to frame bigger projects. But at least this one has syntax highlighting, so it's already better than Notepad. So test a function. Hello. You can save this. And now from this notebook, we can restart this. So now we can say import utils as ut. And now note that if we import, we have this import structure to use any of the functions that we have defined in ut. We would have to write ut dot and name of the function. Okay. So ut dot test function, and here we have to call it, and this gives us our law. An alternative syntax could have been also from utils import test function, and in this case we don't need the ut dot, okay, because this we have. In this case, we have imported that specific function with its name. So those two syntaxes, usually I would use the first one if you use many functions from the same module. If you're just importing one small function, you can just safely use the second one. Okay.
Where did you save test function?
Sorry?
Where did you save test function?
I just create the txt file, and like in this case, I'm in just my root folder, and they are all together in the same folder. So I have notebook 1, notebook 2, and utils.py are all in the same folder.
So how does it know where to look for it?
So that's why I told you to put it just in the same folder as the notebooks. That's like all the files that you have in the same folder where the notebook is are accessible for importing. So that's the easiest option. There is another way that I tend not to use, because at that point it's better to make things importable in another way. But if you have, like, you can add new file paths, as in MATLAB, you can add folders where to look for code. So I will probably, I don't have this in the lecture, I will just show you. You can import, and I will put it in the lecture later when I review the material. But you can import sys, and you have a variable which is sys.path. And this is a list of all the places where sys, where like Python looks for stuff that can be imported, okay? So every .py file that is in any of those folders can be imported. So note, like, this folder here is actually my standard library folder, and like this folder here is the folder with all my side packages, okay? And this folder here is the folder where the notebook is in. So if I had defined a module with some functions, like a .py file with some functions in one place, and I want to make it available in another place without pip installing anything, I can just write sys.path.append, and here I just put my new path with .py files, and this will make it available for importing. Okay. I would not recommend this.
And when you kill this kernel, this path is gone.
Exactly. So this is just a runtime editing of the sys variable, which lives and dies just for this kernel. So you would have to put this at the beginning. That's why I do not recommend it, because if you want to have a function available in every project that you want to make, you probably want to put that in a pip installable package from where, like, after which you can just import things properly, and you don't want to keep appending stuff to your path variable everywhere. Okay, so this is how, but yeah, to keep it simple, as long as you're just working on one single project, you will have most likely multiple notebooks in the same place, and you can put your utils .py files in the same directory. Okay, so this actually concludes the part on working with your local installation. The next session is how to actually start working with a file system where you have organized your data and you need to read stuff from and write stuff to. Okay. So yeah, obviously being aware of the tools that are around to easily work with the file system can be super useful. And the fundamental library and object that you need to know, basically the only one, is the path object from the pathlib module. So it's a class that you can just import in this way. There is another library that you find around. It's called the OS library. You read scripts, and it's perfectly legit. JC here is a big fan of the OS module. But it's a bit outdated. Nowadays, path is strongly encouraged nowadays. Okay, so if you're learning from scratch and you don't know OS already, stick to path. Yeah, so we import this path class from which we will start making path objects. Okay, and we make path objects. So you all know what a path in the file system is a location in the file system of either a folder or a file. And we create a path object just by by passing a string to the path. We instantiate the path class, passing a string that represents the place in the file system that we want to represent. Okay, so in this case, I'm on a Mac, and this is just a folder on my computer. Note that if you are doing this on a Windows, you will obviously run into the backslashes issue, which in Python you solve by putting an R in front of the string. Okay, this actually stands for row string. So the issue is that normally with strings with backslashes, you represent, they're called special characters, like tab or new line, that are represented with \n or \t, and that's why you have issues when you define a path with backslashes. But if you put the R in front, the backslashes are just read as backslashes, and so this fixes the issue. Okay. And if you run this on a Mac, you will get an object of one kind. On a Windows, this will be a different object, but it doesn't matter because they all have the same properties. And this is the nice thing, that using writing directories and operations on directories with this library, we can write something that work on any file system. We can also define a path from a non-existing location. I don't know, this is an existing location. It is the path of a notebook, and we can check whether this exists or not with the exist method. So we can always check out whether a file exists or a folder exists just by asking .exists. We can make up funny non-existing path. We will not get an issue when we initialize the path, okay? Because this can be a path that does not exist, but we want to make, okay? That's why it doesn't fail. But then if this does not exist and we ask whether it exists, we will get a false. They have a bunch of useful attributes. So if you given now I'm working with the path of this notebook that I just defined, okay? So the name, if I write .name, this will be the name of just the folder or the file that this is a path of, okay? So basically just remove all the folder structure and just give you the name of the thing that is represented. If you write .stem is the name without the extension. Okay, this is useful. I don't know, if you load a txt and you have to save an image with the same name, with stem you just take care of removing the extension. And with parent you can get as the another path object, which is the path that represents the parent directory of that object. Okay. So if you want to move up in the hierarchy, you can write .parent. You can also concatenate it. Yeah, and you can actually. Okay, maybe there is this later, but I'm not sure. So I will just check, show it now. I'm sure that this might have been skipped. So you can create a new file, a new path location. If you want to concatenate path, I don't know, you want to go to the parent but then select a different file, okay? You can use the slash, and note that this is not the string slash, which would have obviously problems with the because Mac users would have to put this and Windows user would have to put this. We just use the slash always on any kind of system. And here we put a string, I don't know, text file.txt, and we get a new path that represents this new place and location. And we can do this multiple times, I don't know, we can put here subfolder. Okay, and this just concatenates. So we can concatenate path with the slash operator of Python and strings. Yeah, and then the very useful thing that we can do is to search for files in places. Many times maybe we know the name of the folder where we are keeping the data, but we don't want to hard code in our script the full name of every single piece of data that we want to load. This is the same as magic numbers that we want to avoid. And so we have a method for browsing the file system. And this method is called .glob. Okay? And this method .glob uses so-called regular expressions to find anything in the file system that matches some search parameters that we specify. Okay, so let's unpackage this. So basically you have to learn the very basics of this regular expression syntax that you use for search strings. And the most basic command that we use in regular expressions is just the asterisk. Asterisk means anything. Okay, so asterisk matches any possible string and any possible character. So this is the way we use glob. So here we define a path object, okay? And then we can say that object dot glob, and we pass to glob as a string the regular expression that we want to use. So in this case, the regular expression that I'm using is just asterisk, which means give me anything that you find in that folder, because asterisk is not putting any condition on the name of the path that I'm looking for. So I can the result of this glob operation is something that I can iterate on, okay? So here I'm just iterating on the result, and I'm printing all paths that I find as possible matches for this search. So this is everything that is contained in that folder, okay? And this includes files, but also folders, okay? So this just matches anything with any name.
So if you, instead of the asterisk, you put the extension of the file, like .csv, .py, you could iterate the loop over all.
Precisely. Exactly, next slide. The thing is, you do not want to write this, because if you write this will try to match exactly this. So if you do not put any asterisk, glob will try to find exactly this string in the folder, and there is no file that is just called .ipynb, okay? And the way you deal with this is you put the asterisk before. So in regular expression language, if you put asterisk and then a string, this means look for anything that is followed by ipynb and then is finished. So anything that just finishes with ipynb, okay? And this is exactly the kind of filtering that you were describing. The converse, if we want to look for something that starts in some way, okay, we just have to put the asterisk after. So lecture1.asterisk means get me anything that starts with exactly this and finishes with anything, okay? And this gets me anything that starts with lecture1.
What if I put the asterisk in the middle?
So if I put the asterisk in the middle, anyone has any guess? So remember that asterisk stands for anything.
Like, for example, if I
Everything
have...
that is in the middle of between these two phrases, I will elect and you are...
Exactly. So this looks for anything that start exactly with the four letters L, E, C, T and ends with URE1 dot, and there's anything in between those characters.
So, for example, let's say I have a list of 10 participants, file name participant, number of participants, experiment 1, and in the same folder experiment 2, I don't know, I can write participant asterisk experiment 1 just to select the one for experiment.
Exactly. Precisely that. Yeah, you can put any number of asterisks that you want, and to do something similar to what you just mentioned. In this case, we are looking for anything that just contains panda somewhere in the file name. So in this case, the file can start with whatever it has to contain panda, and then can finish it with whatever, and we get some of those. But we could also have written, I don't know, something like more and pandas, as many asterisks as we want. This is just looking for something that has the word more and then the word pandas without, like, with anything in between them, anything before and anything after, and this just filters stuff that has also this word.
If you had a file with name more pandas altogether.
In this case, this look for some. Sorry.
If you keep the asterisk, like yes, but if you had a file in your folder that's named like more pandas.
It finds it. Like asterisk can also be nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's also matched by nothing. Okay, but obviously then we might want to know whether something that we have found is a directory or a file, and this we can check out with the .isdir method that just returns, like quite intuitive, returns true if something is a directory and false if something is a file. Okay. So here I'm just like looping over the same stuff that I was plotting, like was printing here. Most of those are just notebooks. There's 2 folders, and in this case, I'm printing the path only if the path is a directory, and this is what I'm getting. Okay. Sometimes it's useful, like sometimes we also want to look in subfolders, because this is just looking in the folder. It's not searching in subfolders. If we want to do that search, like the deeper search, we have to use rglob, where the R stands for recursive, because like this is a recursive function. We want to find all subfolders, and then subfolders, subfolders, and subfolders, and subfolders, etc. So we just write rglob instead of glob, and this is giving us way more things, because this is also giving us all the content of all subfolders. Okay, and again, we can combine, like this takes the same kind of regular expressions that we were mentioning.
This is a really silly question. Could you like break the whole thing if you define in this loop like something that creates a subfolder within?
I mean, you do not break them. Python will not complain. We just keep going on forever. But it is exactly as writing while true. You will get something that, I mean, I don't know, maybe you can collapse your file system if you actually also generate some files with some content in them. That's possible. You can try it out, but yeah, it's not forbidden. And yeah, one important thing to remember, and this will bother you, I don't know why they made this decision, but we have to deal with that. So what you get from glob, I say that we can iterate on it, we can make a for loop, for path in, whatever, but that thing is not as, like I would normally expect a list, right? A list of path objects that are all the path objects that are matched. But the thing that we get is not a list, okay? Is something that in Python is called a generator, which is basically something that can be a list the moment you iterate on it. And it's done for efficiency purposes, because until you actually iterate on it, there's nothing in memory representing all the paths that you have found. So if you just made a huge infinite search that is looking for all the places in your computer, and this would be a very large list in memory, this is not allocating that list. This is just basically giving the instructions to run through the generator and creating this list, but it's not making the list, which means that you can iterate on it, but you cannot index it, because it's something that is like, it's not a list that has been populated yet, is something that will be populated the moment you write a for loop to go through it. So you cannot write something like just a path.glob something and then put an index as if this was a list. This will fail, and it will tell you, actually, with an error that we can interpret, it tells us that generator, so this kind of object, is not subscriptable.
Why do you think that it's not a good thing? Like you said that.
No, I mean it makes sense. It's just that in like a billion times I end up writing this, which I dislike. Like I don't like the fact that I always have to convert this to a list. Like I use this very often. This is basically the beginning of every notebook that I write when I'm loading some data, and every time I have to write, like, convert this to a list before, and I'm bothered by this, but yeah, just a matter of taste. You can very easily just convert it to a list in this way, and at this point, this is something that you can index. Like this is just a normal list, and we can, well, let's define it as like a file list. So now this is actually a list of all the paths that represent the locations in that folder. Okay. Yeah. Also, make sure you do not assume that. So when you run it, files are not sorted. Okay. If you want them to be sorted, you have to explicitly, like, there is this sorted function that you can use. I don't think we have seen it until now, but this is just something that, like, if you have a bunch of lists or paths, path, it just sort them alphabetically, okay? So if you iterate with this sorted, now those files are sorted alphabetically. I found this when I was checking this out, I found a nice reference. Apparently there was a piece of software for organic chemistry analysis that was written. This result will change depending on the operative system that you are. Like if you, like sometimes like some operative systems can give you sorted files even without writing sorted. Sometimes you will find just randomly ordered files. And apparently some people wrote a script that was very used in the like organic chemistry community that was associating data and metadata depending on their position in the list. So it would take file 1 was data, file 2 was metadata, file 3 was data, and file 3 was metadata, but only if the list was sorted alphabetically. Apparently, like they developed it on a computer where this was the case, but then this was giving inconsistent results where people were running it on other operative systems, and there were like tens of papers that were published using the software before someone figured it out. So yeah, make sure that you remember that you cannot assume that files are sorted. And I should have moved this slide earlier, but this is what we were saying about the fact that we can make like directly, like we don't have, if we want to create the path for a subfolder of this location, we don't have to rewrite the full thing again. We can just concatenate it using the slash. And yeah, we can use this to create folders, and there is this make dir method that we can use to avoid the possibility of it wants you to be aware of the fact that that location may exist already. So like you can, like in this case, I already have a folder named in this way. So if I just try to make the folder without specifying anything, it throws me a file exist error. It tells me that it cannot make a new folder that is named as a folder that already exists and might have some content. It wants you to actually write, like pass it as argument is exist okay, that tells it, okay, like I'm aware of the fact that it might exist. It will not overwrite it. If it exists, it will just, but so you know, you are aware of the fact that you're not creating a folder that was just there and there might be file, like, because the problem is if you do not do it explicitly, if you're kind of assuming that.
I get like lucky it exists, but so if it's not overwriting here, it's gonna change its name, because then if I look at my computer, I cannot have in the same folder a folder which use the same names.
No, this is like if you pass exist okay, if the folder already exists, it will not be like you will not make a new folder. Like this will just pass without doing anything. It just says, okay, the location already exists. I don't have to do anything. Oh yeah, and another thing is like if you want to make, there is this other argument that is useful to know. If we want to, so now this folder is empty, okay? If I want to make a subfolder path, okay, so if I just do this, okay, and then I make the directory, this will be fine. But if I want, oh sorry, I should not do this. I'm doing what I just told you not to do. So this is how you should do it. Subfolder. So this will be fine. But if I try to do this, okay, this will complain. Sorry. Make it. Okay, this will complain because it expects this to exist already. Okay, this does not generate the full path until, like, it checks whether the parent exists. If you want to create in just one line both the parent folder and the subfolder, you have to pass parents equal to true. And this will create the parent folder and the subfolder, and any number of folders and subfolders that you need to create your full path.
So it wouldn't work to include slash subfolder within the same.
No, it would not work because what matters is what exists already in your file system.
Mm-hmm.
So it can only create something in a location that already exists unless you explicitly tell it to create any number of directories. Okay, and yeah, we can also move files. We obviously want to do it super carefully, but we can use the .replace method to change the location of one file with another file. Okay, so if we have here we have a container folder. This stuff is here. So I have a container folder, which is this one, and then I want to move another folder, which is this new folder. I want to move it inside container folder. So the container folder is represented by this variable. Oh, wait, you're probably not reading anything. Okay, so the container folder is represented by this variable called a path. The path that I want to, the folder that I want to move is represented by this path called path to move. We can just say path to move dot replace, and we pass as the argument of replace the new location that we want for our, in this case, for our folder. And in my case, I'm telling it that the new location should be this path slash the name. So I'm not changing the name. I'm just moving the folder without changing the name. I could have also written here a new folder name. Okay, and this I can do here in this case. So you will see that now I don't have new folder anymore here, and this actually it got moved inside here. Now I'm doing this with a folder, but you can do this with files in the same way. And this can be very convenient because, for example, I don't know, you can imagine you have, I don't know, a folder where you have a bunch of data, where you have multiple subjects, every subject has a session, and you want to organize this in a hierarchical folder structure where you have one folder for every subject and then one folder for every session or something like that. You can very simply, obviously you have to get a bit the syntax of this thing, but you can, what I'm doing here is I am looking for all the txt files that are in that data folder. Okay, I'm splitting them with the underscore to get the name of the subject and the name of the session, and then I'm creating a new location as a new data folder that is this reorganized data folder, slash subject, so one folder for every subject, slash session, so one folder for every session, and then I'm using the make dir argument to create those new folders for all my files. Okay, and then I'm just writing file.replace. I pass the new location where I want the file to be, and I just keep the file name. Okay, I'm running this. Now I have removed my txt files from here, and I have this reorganized data folder where I have subjects, I have sessions, and I have the txt files for every session. Okay, and this can be super useful if you have to never move your data around manually if you have more than, I don't know, 5 pieces of folders that you have to create. Please, now here I'm just showing you the moving thing. There is also a way of copying stuff, obviously, but yeah, this is as far as we are going now. And the next thing is actually to check out the practical. You can you will do it in the practical, I think, but you can imagine in the same way you can parse the folder structure. like what we have been seeing so far, how it is very useful to create those data frames that represent the structure of your data, like I don't know, the structure of trials or subjects or experiments that you have, whatever. You can imagine going in the same way through a folder structure and automatically do a pandas data frame that has columns that represent, I don't know, subject identity and session identity and stuff like that, using the information of the file system that you're getting the data from. Okay. Yeah, there should be an exercise about this in the practicals, so you can check out the practicals. And yeah, make sure that now the practicals, you should get the notebook on GitHub. You can download notebooks from GitHub. So go in the GitHub repository, in the practicals, find the practical 2.1, download it somewhere where you want to keep your notebooks and run it locally. Because from now on, we will run stuff locally and not in the Google Colab. Sulla tabella contiene, ci sono tutte le date, sono filo. Fai i practicals. Scusa, tu sei delle Sì. Ok, quando sono fatto sul pulsante? Forse devi...
Equal to true. Applicant creates
Tu hai gruppato il nome in
well,
tutte le
folder
folder.
with the same name.
Sullo spunto fai un utente? Ok.
It's not allowed to me.
It's not a good interface, so basically
Yeah, but I tried to do this. Disappears. So that's
Python will say
I can
you say
download
allow
it.
creating.
okay.
You have the possibility, it exists, it doesn't exist.
Click on draw,
Okay.
and then file,
By
save
default,
change.
there is an error saying there is a something here.
So it's not creating a new folder, it's that you are constructing it to already exist and we're gonna use the one that you are telling me to use.
Be careful, there is already something here, and if you see it might just like put the stuff you want to do.
Yeah, like I'm getting that. I don't know if I'm not sure it exists. If
The
it
practical needs
exists,
some
use
mystifying,
that one.
yes?
That's basically.
Yeah, it's usually like put
It's not like
inside.
you're
Download
really
some
making a
mystifying
folder. It's
or
making
It's
a
not
folder.
connected.
Oh, okay.
But the intention that you need that you create a file
There should be a link for downloading the file, which apparently is not appearing, but is that on GitHub?
Yes.
You already have the file as this, and if you want to create a folder,
Sorry.
indication that you are doing something which is like Cognitive Neuroscience.
So guys, sorry for whoever or just downloaded the notebook, you will see that it asks for like you have to download some data, but you don't see the link because I thought I pushed the last version, but I just did it now. So to actually see the link that you will need, you want to either download it again or check it out now on GitHub, and this is the link where you have to download the data from. Sorry.